Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. So, a lot of people here, we're looking at New York. There's been these outcries because there has been a lot of violence there, crime wave. We know crime is getting worse in many urban areas, particularly in New York, due to a whole bunch of different policies, but specifically, there have been a lot of crimes against women. And all of a sudden, many women, even those in political positions, are saying, what happened to all the good men? Why aren't the men protecting us? Why aren't they stopping all of this? What could have happened? I think we probably can understand that there are a lot of incentives that have been switched around, changing the way that people behave in society and have made things very dangerous for women in public, unfortunately. Coming on today to join me and talk about this subject is the author of The Boniface Option, Andrew Isker. Thank you for joining me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about your book. But before we get started, can you tell everybody a little bit about what you do? They may not be familiar with you.
Yeah, I'm a pastor in small town, rural Minnesota of a small evangelical church in Waseca, Minnesota, and I write, I post on social media. I'm a poster, and yeah, so a lot of the topics I discuss are things like this, masculinity, and and just broader culture, and how much things have radically changed in the last 50 or 60 years. Most of us aren't really familiar with it. We don't really think about it because you're born into the situation that you're in, right? Probably a good chunk of the people watching your show are born after like 9/11 or were like toddlers, right, in the early 2000s, and they're part of this milieu, and they don't even realize that the world 60 or 70 years ago was radically different than what we have now. And there's very little historical perspective about how messed up things are. And so I like to write about those things, talk about those things, show that the world that we live in today has been manufactured to be this way. It's not naturally the way that it is. And this topic in particular, right, just rampant crime, where nobody is really allowed to do anything about it, is not normal, right? This is not the normal situation that people have had for millennia, right? When you have problems like this, you deal with them. And so, yeah, I'm excited to discuss all these things with you here today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, I knew that it was important to bring you on to talk about this because when we are in this situation, like you said, this is not an accident. This is manufactured. There's a particular set of incentives we've set up, a particular way that we have structured our culture to come to this inevitability. But all of a sudden, we have a lot of people standing around saying, what happened? How could this be the case? They want to call back to a time period that they have decried, that they've demonized. They want to bring forth men from a time that they have thrown away, and they want them to enter into a world that they've created and save them from the consequences of many of the decisions that have been made.
Yeah.
So I want to dive into what's happening in New York, the responses to that, what could be done, why we got in this situation, and of course your book. But before we get to all that, guys, remember it is your moral duty to hire based people through companies like New Founding. Hey guys, I need to tell you about today's sponsor, New Founding Talent. Look, we all know that the job market is a disaster right now. Based people can't find good companies to work for, and good companies can't find anybody to get the job done. The competency crisis is very, very real. So how do we get these two incredibly important groups together? We need organizations like New Founding. New Founding has created a network of high excellence professionals who are seeking to join grounded American businesses. These are individuals often in elite organizations who are ready for a team and a mission that supports their values instead of working against them. Aligned companies are already using this network to hire high trust, exceptional individuals who can match the culture and mission of their teams. So if you're looking for better employees to build a better world, you need to go ahead and apply for access to the New Founding Talent Network at newfounding.com/talent. You'll get connected with candidates who will build your business. That's newfounding.com/talent. Check it out today. All right, Andrew. So I want to give people some context for what we're going to be talking about here. I'm sure a lot of people have seen these kind of videos making the rounds on social media. There's some guy in a subway. He's screaming at people or he's intimidating people. Maybe he's even
Hmm.
actively hitting a woman, something like that, something terrible. And a lot of people are standing by. And all of a sudden, we get a lot of people on social media saying, what are these men doing? Why aren't these men in
Where
the
are
subway
they?
protecting women? What's happening here? And of course, like I said, we see this pop up all the time online. But recently, we just had a councilwoman. She's apparently on the New York City Council, Amanda Ferris, and she just said this: that there's a post from the Woman's Caucus that says, there's attacks against women in Lower Manhattan. We can't believe that there are all these attacks against women, these violent outbreaks against women in these areas. And she says, where are all the men calling this out? Now, I don't know. I have this thing I call a memory. It allows me to recall events for more than 10 seconds in the past. And I remember distinctly when Daniel Penny, a former Marine, I believe, who
Hmm.
defended a subway full of people. There's a homeless man screaming about the violence he was going to do, many women in the area. And he attempted to defend the lives and the well being of people in that car. And when he went ahead and restrained a man, and the man ended up dying, unfortunately, but that's what happens sometimes whenever you take your life into your own hands when you put people in a violent situation. But Daniel
Hmm.
Penny was not trying to kill the man. He was simply trying to restrain him. The man was of ill health, of course. And Daniel Penny is
Hmm.
now facing a second-degree manslaughter charge. He's supposed to stand a trial, I believe, in October for this
Hmm.
charge. And for some reason, after attempting to arrest a heroic man who tried to protect, women and others in a very similar scenario, nobody wants to risk their lives and their livelihood and their freedom by going out and protecting. What happened to all the good men, Andrew? I just don't understand
Yeah,
what happened to
yeah.
all of
They just all disappeared. Yeah, they
them.
just yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's similar. The Daniel Penny story is also similar, just with crime in general in the country. With you know the whole defunding the police situation, and then you try not only Derek Chauvin but the other policemen that were there, and put them in prison for essentially doing their jobs. Like, one, he was just doing crowd control and he's in prison for like 3 years, right? And then they're like, why doesn't anyone want to be a policeman anymore? Right? Where are they? Why can't we find them? And it's obvious why, right? If you criminalize um, you know men doing their job, protecting their communities, and also ordinary citizens who are standing up for their the people around them, their neighbors. This is what happens, right? It's obvious, right? And so everybody sees that, and they know, I don't want to go to prison, so I'm just gonna leave it alone. I'm not gonna stick my neck out for anybody. And it's just basic anarcho tyranny, where you can allow crime to happen, right? Almost actively promoting it, but then the hammer comes down at anybody who tries to stop it, right? These are not accidental things. This is like policy by design, right? These are policy decisions that have been made. And so, it's ironic that, this councilwoman says this, and other people are saying this. Where are the men? Why aren't they defending the women? But I mean, it's almost like the point of, maybe this has happened to you before. It's happened to me, where like I was raised, you hold the door open when you're walking into a building for other people, especially for women, and it's just natural, instinctive what you do. And I've had like people give me dirty looks or even say things to me, especially women, when you hold the door open for them. Like, what? I can hold the door open myself, right? And then what happens is, why don't men hold the doors open for women anymore? Like, the same people that are decrying it and saying this is misogyny to hold the door open for women, then they complain about it, right? And they want they want their cake and to eat it too, right? They want to have this egalitarian society where there's no distinctions between men and women, but then at the same time, they also want men to be very chivalrous and very respectful of women, and hold women up on a pedestal like they did in the olden days. But you can't have that. You can't have both of those things at the same time. And so they want men to defend women, and this is just a natural, right, normal response. This is how all human societies everywhere have operated, understanding that men and women are different, that men are stronger, and that they have a duty to defend the weaker sex. And now they don't, right? And so there's a freak out about that. And so it's just this catch-22, right? If you defend them, you go to jail. If you don't defend them, they complain about how horrible you are, how you don't defend women, how you don't care about their suffering. And so that's the situation that we're now in. And I don't exactly know how it changes, right? I don't know how men like Daniel Penny aren't going to do the things they do anymore, at least in the near term.
Yeah, it's amazing how this is just the personification of C.S. Lewis's Men Without
Yeah.
Chests, right? You castrate the gilding and then ask it to bear fruit, right?
Yeah.
Like how can how can you not protect me after I spent all of my time calling your masculinity toxic, talking about how your ability to do something physical, to master that kind of space, to have that level of aggression, that is all toxic, it's all terrible. But why aren't you now out here doing the very thing I've taught you not to do? We spend all of our time teaching every male, especially public school, everything else. Conflict resolution is always completely emotional, right? It's always a therapeutic approach. You'll notice that in that post from that councilwoman, even the call to action for men was entirely feminine. It's why aren't you calling this out? As if some guy who's sexually assaulting women on a train is like, oh, I got a stern lecture, I'll probably call this off. But this really is the understanding. When you think that every interaction can kind of you can just kind of school marm people into a protection behavior, this is where we get. And I think another big part of this is that a lot of when you turn men and women into political interest groups, right? It's all men versus all women, instead of understanding that actually you're never going to get rid of men. Like, sorry, you're not actually going to G word half of the population. And so what's going to happen is you can have good men protect you from bad men, but you're never going to just get rid of the violence of men. And any attempt to do so is actually going to have more horrific results than you can imagine. And we end up in situations like this, where all the good men are completely frozen, unable to act in this tyrannical situation, like you're explaining. And all the women are like, well, I don't understand why are you doing this thing that I know deep down you should be doing for me, but we've removed all reason for you to do so.
Yeah, and it's wild. Like, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the framing that she made, right? Why aren't you calling it out, right? It's like, well, if I said something, the guy's going to attack me, and I'm going to be in a fight, and there's going to be violence, right? That's just what happens. And it does. I mean, especially like you bring up, I went to public school. I remember being in grade school and being told that violence is never the answer, that you need to talk about your feelings, and you'll be in trouble. And I remember thinking, like, if I ever threw a punch in school, like, they would just put me in jail immediately in like third grade, right? Like deep in your mind, that's what you're taught, that you can never do that. And like the answer to bullying, like when I was in middle school, I was bullied a lot. And I remember telling my dad, who is a wonderful boomer. We love our boomers, don't we, folks? And he just told me, well, when these people are being mean to you, Andrew, just punch them, right? And if you get called into the principal's office, or you're suspended or whatever, that's okay. I'll stay home with you. That's fine. I'm not going to be mad at you. You're not going to be in trouble. And I'm grateful that I had a father like that told me those things, to stand up for yourself, because most people didn't. Most people don't. They internalize these things throughout a lifetime of being told, no, be a good boy. Don't ever stand up for yourself. Don't ever stand up for other people. And then we reach a point like this where nobody does. And the rare few, like Daniel Penny, they face consequences for it. And so how do you break out of these things? I mean, I know if if something like Daniel Penny's situation happened in my town, very rural, I'm in Minnesota, so it's a blue state. So Keith Ellison could always change the location of a trial and do those things. But if it were in my county, they wouldn't even charge him, right? They would let him go, right? It would be normal.
Parade, right?
Yeah. They'd give him a key to the city. Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, some of it is, you need to be in a geographic location where like normal America still exists, right? That's a big point. I would not want to live in New York City for this reason, or Minneapolis even. I would not want to be in those places for the sake of myself and my family. And so like the Daniel Penny thing signals like get out of these places. It's ironic because it happened like right after the big controversy with the Dilbert guy, he's like, just go away, get away. And it's like, get out of these places, because you're not going to be able to defend yourself against crime. Like, even if you try to, the hammer will come down on you. And you see like New York City this past week, all of these things really got overshadowed by other controversies du jour from the past week. But you had that police officer who was killed by a guy who had been arrested 21 times, in and out of jail several times, and a guy that should have just been locked up forever. That policeman never should have been killed, because like this guy should have been locked away and the key thrown away years ago, right? And so a lot of this stuff is like the will to deal with crime doesn't exist. And some of it, I think, you just go back to, the mostly peaceful summer of 2020 and the eruption of crime that happened after that. The will to deal with crime was taken away. There was this like weaponized empathy that was wielded, where it's like, oh no, it's these poor people. This is the new Jim Crow, and they're just getting a raw deal because of systemic racism and things like that. And it's like, no, these are criminals that need to be dealt with. And so a lot of it, is this feminine frame. You see it online. People talk about the longhouse, and that's what it is. Like that tweet from that city councilwoman, it really embodies that we're going to hector you, we're going to lecture you, we're going to be you're going to be under our thumb, and then when you don't do what we think you should do, we're going to complain about that as well. And it totally dominates the entire structure of society, where there is no like masculine virtue that is allowed to even develop, much less be expressed in situations like this. And so the overcoming of it will be, men will have to summon the will to do things that must be done to deal with crime, to deal with criminals. And I think it largely will be expressed in the I don't want to say great divorce. People use the phrase great divorce, but really just this sifting of America between the two Americas that exist, and the good America, the real America, where crime is dealt with, there's peace and law and order, that will flourish. Whereas the rest, cities like New York and Minneapolis and Chicago and so forth, will continue to spiral out of control and destroy themselves. Right? And it'll take a long time for this to be sorted out.
I'm with you. A lot of people talk about, kind of national divorce, and I don't think we're ever going to get like a formal secession of states. I don't think that anything like that's coming. But I do think the Great Sword is real, that you're talking about there, because, look, I have this disagreement all the time with people online, the Shake Shack Americans, as we like to call our urbanite conservatives, right?
Yes.
And I understand their point. You can't, the cities are financially powerful, they're culturally powerful. If you abandon them, then you're abandoning all of these influences. I understand what they're saying. I understand where they're coming from. But a lot of time it feels like they just think that at some point, they'll be able to rule from these places. And it's like, that's not happening, guys. Like you said, these places, you cannot defend yourself. You cannot defend your family. You cannot have families here. And so, okay, so you're the king of what? This desolated, wasteland of crime and degeneracy. That's useless to you. And so I think you're right that over time we're going to see even more of this sorting. Say what you want. Nothing, no state is perfect, but we didn't have a lot of BLM rioting in Florida.
Yeah.
I've got a sheriff. When there were looters during a hurricane, who said, "Yeah, if someone comes and takes your stuff, shoot them dead, and let everybody else
Yeah.
know that if they
Yeah.
come, they're not going to make it through here." That's the kind of
Yeah.
stuff that will change the way that you approach, the law and order in your area. That anarcho tyranny
Mm-hmm.
is a feature; it's not a bug. And
Mm-hmm.
the therapeutic state, the idea that all these conflicts can just be managed away, and that means that you'll go ahead and get rid of all the other uncomfortable things like crime statistics that people start
Yeah.
to notice once you start actually enforcing the law. That's always going to lead you to ruin, right? And I think
Yeah.
that one of the reasons that it's been so important to get rid of masculinity, there's a lot of reasons why that's become important, but one of the most important reasons for the total state, for the attempt to kind of bring everything under centralized state rule, is getting rid of what was kind of that buffer of violence, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
a difference between, hey, we need to resolve this issue, and hey, we need a guy with a gun and a badge to come in and
Mm-hmm.
resolve this issue. And that buffer used to be the domain of men. It used to be the
Yeah.
domain of fathers. It used to be the domain of brothers. We can resolve something, and this is what created a high trust society. How can a
Mm-hmm.
woman who doesn't have a family member, a male family member standing next to her, safely get onto public transit? Well, the answer is
Yeah.
because everyone else, every other man in that piece of public transit is acting as a surrogate protector, right? He understands
Yeah.
he has a particular duty as a man, he has a particular role as a man, even if he doesn't know that woman, even though he gets no particular value from standing up for her. He knows it's his moral duty. He understands it's his
Mm-hmm.
social obligation as a Christian, as a man, to go ahead and stand between her and violence, even though he receives no benefit, even though he has no familial connection. And that buffering of violence, that okay, men are ready to stand in, even if they are not professionals, even if they're not equipped by the
Mm-hmm.
state, meant that we didn't have to have what we have now. Now New York is
Yeah.
walking people through every single subway entrance as if it's the TSA, which is
Yeah.
itself already an insane
Yeah.
invasion of privacy. And we're doing all of these things because we're pretending we don't know where crime comes from, and we don't
Yeah.
know how to stop it. And so
Mm-hmm.
instead, we're doing this anarcho tyranny where we have every law abiding person sit there and get scanned, but the
Mm-hmm.
people who we know are dangerous, we pretend aren't dangerous, and then if someone tries to step in and stop them, we punish them. And so it's no surprise that if the state wants to have all of this power, if the state wants to be able to stop every citizen and search them no matter what they look like,
Mm-hmm.
if the state wants to be able to lock everyone up and have the true monopoly on violence, even the most low grade version of it, which keeps people
Mm-hmm.
safe, then they need to eliminate those intermediate roles in violence that men used to play.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting too. I don't know if you saw the funeral for the police officer, the NYPD officer, over the weekend, and just this crowd of 10,000 uniformed officers, at his funeral, and you think, right, those are all, I mean, mostly men that have taken this vow to defend their community. And what can those guys be thinking, right? Having Kathy Hochul be the governor and Eric Adams be the mayor, and just things being run into the ground all around them. Like, they have to be longing for someone to come in and restore order to this place. And even like normal people that live in New York City, which I think there are a few, right? I mean, here in like rural
Both of
America,
them, yeah.
yeah, we think it's just they're all crazy people, right? But there are actually normal people that live in these places that want to have order. They don't want rampant crime. And once upon a time, like, Rudy Giuliani did get elected mayor of New York City, like basically on that same agenda, and did clean it up. And so, will we return to a time like the 1990s, the mid 1990s, where law and order will be pursued as as like the top of the agenda in local and regional politics, even national politics. It was like that was, in 2020, that was like the big thing against Biden that they were saying is like, oh, he passed the crime bill and he's so bad. And it's like, that's like the only good thing he ever did when he was in the United States Senate, was passing that crime bill in the mid 90s. And so you look at it like, can that occur again? Maybe. But I think it has to continue to get worse before people recognize reality. I mean, it's the same thing with the immigration issue, right? You have to be like watching videos of thousands of people rushing across the border and trampling over National Guardsmen before you're like, oh, maybe this isn't so good, right? Maybe this is a problem and we should deal with it. And so, I'm always optimistic about this stuff. I hate that everyone wants to blackpill and think like, oh, it's all over, where there's nothing we can do. Like, the solutions to these things are obvious, right? They're obvious to everyone, right? Human societies, cities have already technology that has existed for thousands and thousands of years, and they knew how to deal with crime. And all of a sudden, we're in the 21st century, and we're like, oh, we just have no idea. Where does this come from? What is this? Right? No, everybody knows how you do it. And the only question is, when does this, therapeutic state just collapse and die, and people want toughness and order? Like you see, like Trump kind of speaking off the cuff at this funeral, and saying, in kind of a very low key tone. He knows he's at a funeral, and is trying not to make it too overtly political, but just saying, no, there needs to be order. There needs to be, the crime needs to be dealt with. We need to get tougher, and I mean, that resonates massively with people when they see this, when they see the image of the widow of that police officer and his little boy, right? You see that, and you think, like, this was a policy decision that caused this, right? This little boy reaching out to his father's casket, like this someone chose, many people with power chose to have this situation exist, and it has to change. It has to change, and I think people. I mean, I'm never like, oh, the sheeple are waking up, right? The masses are waking up. I'm never like that. Like, I'm not a populist in that sense, right? Where I believe where, oh, you just got to wake up the majority and they'll discover it. No, I think it's more of a question of just like basic elite theory, right? They see a crown lying in the gutter, and someone near the top has to say, all right, I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to pick it up, and I'm going to restore order and justice and peace to my country, and do the things that must be done. And you've seen this happen in foreign countries, right? Like El Salvador is the main example, where that was like the murder capital of the world, and now it's one of the most peaceful countries. And what did they do? Well, they just locked up all of the MS-13 members, right? Like, and then all the murder went away. Crazy how that happened. And so that is what will have to occur here in the United States. And I honestly, I think it will. But there might be, between now and then, though, it could get much, much worse.
Yeah, it's like you said, these are all policy decisions. None of these are accidents. There's no, there's no mistake here, no whoops. This is something that people are actively introducing. We know the answers to these questions, but I've seen this so often. I spent a lot of time as a public school teacher, and it's amazing how much kind of civilizational scaffolding we put around these ideas so that we can't see basic truth, right? Like everybody in a school building knows what discipline works. Everybody in a school building knows how to properly instruct kids. There's no surprise there. But the problem is it doesn't work equally across all populations. And that's a big no-no. We can't notice that. We're not allowed to have those kind of statistics, those results. And so we erect a large amount of artificial scaffolding around the entire educational process to make sure that there's a bunch of BS that people can make money off of, and seminars they can sell and trainings they can do to pretend like they're going to generate results that never come around. And then when they don't come around, we just go back to blaming them on racism or sexism or whatever. And it's the same thing with crime here, right? Like we continuously know what happens. If you talk to any sheriff, they always say, I know exactly where the crime occurs in my area. I know exactly what's responsible. I know exactly how to stop this. There's nothing new about crime in cities. There's nothing new about policing. Of course, different technologies will come around, tweaks can be
Mhm.
made, but ultimately we understand the basics of how this works. But we have to erect a massive amount of scaffolding around all of
Mhm.
our theory so that we can pretend like the obvious thing isn't true. We have
Mhm.
this failed system of restorative justice that's there so we
Mhm.
can cook the numbers on the books to make it, the prison population look smaller and change the
Mhm.
demographic representation and everything there. We have all of these different policies that we make sure we never use, because if we use them, that could really offend some of our sensibilities. And I think
Yeah.
you're right that eventually what's going to happen, it's not going to be top down, but what's going to happen is people are going to sort themselves into areas.
Mhm.
And then it's okay, like, okay, well, do you like the thing where they don't ignore the problem and they use a solution
Mhm.
that might be slightly uncomfortable? Well, then you should move to Florida or Texas
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
wherever. Oh, okay. Well, you don't mind getting constant what's the Anna Kasparian, I think, is the over at
Yeah. Yeah.
TYT.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
believe I keep getting mugged in these places that are following the policies I believed in my
Yeah.
entire life. Wait, all of a sudden
Yeah.
I'm a neoconservative.
Yeah, that's
What a
right. Yeah.
miracle. You know, like eventually these people either figure it out or they just become willing participants in a system that destroys them. And I think that is
Mhm.
exactly what we're going to see, is this constant sorting is what's going to solve it. I don't know if we're going to see a national solution, but I think we
Mhm.
will see regional solutions because the people who can will move, and
Yeah.
they'll invest in those societies and those communities that are actually going to protect them.
Yeah. And I think, to the question of like cities, you can have cities in these red states that you can wield influence in, and they'll continue to grow. Like Florida is a good example. There's several very large cities in Florida that are much safer to live in than New York City or Los Angeles or San Francisco or Chicago. And I mean, you think about that, and as the Great Sort continues out over a generation, those places will continue to grow. They'll continue to grow economically, and you could see in like 50 years, Miami being the center of the new New York City, right? Things like that, where New York continues to decline, and its economic prominence starts to wane, right? That has happened. Like you have civilizations. I mean, just even looking through history, right? These great massive cities that ruled the world, and then all of a sudden they're empty, right? That happens, and it happens for reasons. And sometimes it's puzzling to historians, like how did this happen? And maybe it will be thousands of years from now. They'll look at why was New York City so wonderful and so powerful, and then nobody's there anymore, right? Like things like that really do happen, and I think that is probably just for like normal people, like what do you do in this situation? Well, that's the solution for you is, and especially as these grow, I mean there are more jobs, more opportunity in these places, and more ability for people to move. I mean, I've my parents live in Florida half the year, and every time I go visit them, there's like 50 new subdevelopments where there used to be
Yeah.
fields of cows, right? It's like,
Yep.
huh, that's weird. I wonder why that's happening, right? Well, it's obvious, right? It's obvious. It is a place that people want to be in because it's much safer. I mean, there still is a fair amount of crime in Florida, but it's nowhere near like the major cities. And so, yeah, I think that's what will continue to occur, and it'll happen not just in a place like Florida, but all sorts of other red states, in the South and in the Midwest, and you'll see politics respond to this, right? You'll see politicians like they will look at someone like DeSantis and begin to emulate the things that he's done in Florida for their own states, and you're already starting to see this in many places.
Yeah, I do think we need some border control in
Yeah,
Florida. It starts at the Mason-Dixon line, turn them
that's
around. If they
right.
like I don't mind some of the base people moving down, but too many people are moving in. Who I want to check your bona fide. Sorry, I want your
That's
voting record for the last
right. That's right.
20 years before you can cross in and move into my neighborhood.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's correct, and so I want to make sure before time gets away from us that we talk a little bit about your book. I know, congratulations. Apparently, Joe Rogan's been checking out the Boniface Option.
Yeah,
You know, so
at least Cam Haynes appears to be reading it, and Joe shared the post on Instagram of Cameron Haynes. So it's like, okay, Joe, read the book, man. That'd be cool.
yeah.
And so yeah, it's great. And the book has been way more successful than I thought. You write anything, and you think whatever you wrote is going to be awesome and everyone will like it. And I've posted things where I'm like, this is the best thing I ever wrote, and it gets like 100 views, right? And so you just never know. It's like just total leap of faith. And I was really excited about the book, and I'm very pleased that lots and lots of people have really enjoyed it.
So tell us a little bit about this, because I know, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is that obviously
Yeah.
I've read about the first third of the book so far, but you talk about kind of why we're in this scenario, why culture has
Mhm.
gone this way, why we would lose the ability to say, have a high trust society that would
Mhm.
protect women. You directly address that, at least in the part of the book that I've read so far.
Mhm.
So can you talk a little about the book and kind of what it goes into?
Yeah, I mean the major premise of the book is that you have all sorts of people, commentators and so forth, that are like, oh man, things could get really bad, right? If Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum take over, we'll be eating bugs and living in the pod, and it'll be this horrific dystopia, and so awful. And I'm like, wait a second, like step back and think about the world we already do live in, right? The social conditions, every aspect of the life of life that we have here today. And like if you painted this picture to people living 100 years ago of the life that we have right now, they would think that something way worse than our greatest fears has already occurred, right? They would think that we're already living in this horrible dystopia. And so a lot of the first half of the book is it's kind of black pill. I don't want to black pill people. I don't want to make them depressed and think, oh, it's all over. What can I do? But some of it is like there's so many people that don't even realize things are really bad. And so, yeah, taking them through just the massive shifts economically that have occurred, and sociologically, the massive shifts in families. We don't have children anymore. We don't really have we have marriage, but it's not really the same thing that it was throughout all of history. We don't have the distinction between men and women, certainly economically, but really in every aspect. There's this egalitarian sentiment where men and women are exactly the same, and you can't treat them any different. We can't think about them any differently. And so much of the life that we've had has been purposefully destroyed. And so you see situations like this, right, with the crime and women being attacked, and we know why it's happened, right? This world has been created for us, right? In like the 90s and 2000s, you'd hear about like social engineering. People would talk on the conservative world would talk about like we don't believe in it. We don't want to practice social engineering, things like that. And it's like, well, that's what they've been doing for 60, 70, 80 years, is socially engineering a society that we now have, a society we now live in. And so it's not it's not by accident, right? It's not by just happenstance, like, whoop, this is just market conditions that created the thing that we have. It's been done on purpose. And so then once you recognize the gravity of the situation that we're in, then you can begin to start taking steps personally to change the situation for yourself, for your family, for your community, and begin to do things. Like it's not permanently like this, right? There are
Yep.
ways out.
Yeah, a lot of people obviously, have been warning about this for a long time. I point this out all the time. The
Mm.
religious right in the 70s and the 80s were
Yeah,
talking about where all this was going to go. And the weird thing
yeah,
that happens is there's so many times we were warned, there's a point of no return. There's a point of no
yeah.
return. That where things are going to get too bad. And,
Hmm.
all the people who warned about that are still acting, 30, 40 years later as if nothing has happened. They're still
Yeah.
giving the same warning. Oh, just wait till that next thing comes. But like you said,
Yeah.
like, no, we're already here. You're already
Yeah.
living in that time. You've already passed beyond that threshold. You already through that looking glass. And
Hmm.
the frog has been boiled so slowly you don't even notice it. And so
Hmm.
if you show the world today to somebody from the 80s, they just be like, oh my god, it's
What has
way worse
happened?
than I
Yeah.
ever thought. Like, the craziest member of the Westboro Baptist Church would have been like, well, come on, guys, let's not that's
Yeah.
not going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's not get ridiculous here. And yet here
Yeah.
we are. And so a lot of people, Rob Dreher is famous for his book, The Benedict Option, which he actually took from
Hmm.
Elsdale MacIntyre, even though it's not really the point of that book. And MacIntyre, funny enough, I believe MacIntyre said something like, "Yeah, they're like, how do you feel about the Benedict Option?" He's like, "I wish Rod would have read the rest of the book." Uh, you know, um, but the Benedict Option is basically this idea of we just have to withdraw. Now we've already talked about
Hmm.
how it is important to relocate to situations where you can raise your family safely, where there is a opportunity to defend yourself and
Yeah.
and have a good place for your family. However, I feel like the Boniface option is probably a little different from the full on Benedict option, right? I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of part of where that came from.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, speaking of Rod, like he read the book and reviewed it, and he didn't like it. He thought, and he described me as a very angry young man, right? Very angry. And I mean, I've been on your show here for 40 minutes, so your audience they can decide how angry I am. I don't usually, I have a cold right now. I've lost my voice, so I sound way more gruff than I normally do. So maybe it's not helping my point, but I feel like I'm a pretty, jovial, gregarious kind of guy. So I think Rod has me pegged wrong here. And so, yeah, my main contention with his book, it's like, okay, I read the Benedict option. I liked it for the most part, and I got to the end of it, and I thought, okay, well then now what? Right? I've built my Christian, right wing community out in the woods, and we have this wonderful Hobbit Shire life, but like Mordor's still out there, man, and the orcs are coming. What do we do? And and so my book kind of came out of that, where it's like, okay, we have this now. We have a defensive, like, tactical strategy for the near term, but then what do we do from here? Right? We have to go on offense. Right? We have to be much more aggressive. And so you see this kind of this development among especially evangelicalism, but not exclusively, just Christians in America, that there's kind of like three divergent paths, right? You have the ones that want to continue kind of the normie con, boomer con kind of sensibilities, that things are okay. We're just going to vote our way out of it and be really nice and inoffensive and never step on any toes. And then you have a group that kind of just wants to do Benedict option type of stuff and just withdraw, and it's very pacifistic, right? We're just going to step out of these things and not worry ourselves with the world. And then the third one is like, no, it's time to go on offense. It's time to be much more aggressive. It's time to speak frankly and admit the reality, to oppose things like transgenderism and homosexuality and feminism and all of the social ills that are all around us, right? And just be bold, right? We know that we're out of step with the mainstream culture, and like, you can see what mainstream culture is like, and that's okay. I don't want. Why would you want to be, liked by our culture? And so I think that third group, the ones that are much more aggressive, are going to gain a much bigger, I hate using this terminology, but like market share within the church. That people, especially men, right? And it's like not a coincidence that like this passage in my book gets shared by Cameron Haynes and then Joe Rogan about masculinity, where it's like, no, God made men to be men, and that's good, right? He made men to have strength and to be aggressive. He made men to go to war, right? Adam is in the garden, and Adam is supposed to cut the head off the snake, right? When it comes in, he's supposed to guard and keep the garden, right? This is a big point I make in the book. And he fails. He doesn't do that. He lets his wife get attacked and casts all of humanity into curse and death. And so God wants us to be men. He wants us to be willing to fight for things that are good, right? To stand up for things that are good and right and true. And so, I think those things are going to continue to gain and grow and be very attractive to men. Like I see this just generally like in the right online, and that Christianity, the Christian religion, has become much more attractive to men in kind of the online right, and and to the extent that it will embrace these things, that it's like it's okay to be a man, right? You don't have to apologize. It's okay to be rough around the edges, even a little bit. It's okay to be this way and stand up for things, because in the past it has been, you become a Christian, you have to check all of your masculinity at the door. You kind of have to be a doormat, and the big thing in the evangelical world was like being a servant leader. You got to be a servant leader, right? Which just means do whatever your wife tells you to do, right? And never actually lead. And and that was just like really repulsive to normal men, and so our churches have largely been dominated by women for that reason, and so, right, if you change that paradigm, if men are actually allowed to lead, they're allowed to lead their families, lead in the workplace and in businesses, lead in culture and society, in politics, you can have a lot of changes happen very drastically, and lots of men will want to join this, where you don't have to pretend to not be a man to be a Christian. Like it's now actually, it's very attractive to be willing to fight, against things that are bad. Right? That's good. People want to do that. They want to hear that. They see the stuff. They see, like, Transgender Visibility Day instead of Easter being celebrated by the White House, and they want pastors and leaders in the church to say that's really bad. That's horrible. That's evil. Like, Joe Biden needs to repent. That's wicked. And in the past, right, if that happened, if Obama had done that in 2010 or something, where every evangelical leader would be like, just pretend it didn't happen. And so you saw much more reaction now in over the weekend because of it. And I think a lot of it is, Christians that are on the online right are far more aggressive than they ever have been before, and they're pushing the church to be more on this kind of war footing. And like, you see this, I mean, and it plays kind of into like the Christian nationalism debate, and people will take even like language like I had, like, even in that quote, I said something about, like, God has called you to holy war, right? Not in the sense of like Fed posting, right? Not in the sense of like, yeah, go join a militia or something, but rather, to be a bold man that stands for the truth. And you see this with like guys like James Lindsay, who are like, no, Christian nationalism is this it's this psyop from the government. They're trying to turn Christian nationalists into terrorists and things like that. And it's like that's actually not going to work, because evangelical Christians are generally very stable people. That's not usually the pool that the FBI, when they try to find some schizophrenic guy to do something and cajole him into entrapping himself, those aren't usually the people that fall for that stuff, right? It's rather like, I just want Christian men to act like men and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, Christ is King is also an op.
That's right.
Yeah, so
That's right.
turns out it was actually just every form of Christianity. Who knew that the militant atheists didn't want to see Christianity? Very surprising, though. Funny enough, Richard Dawkins actually just lamented the loss of Christianity. I'm going to be doing a column about that this week. I'm going to get more detail of that. But all right, so Andrew, before we switch over to the questions of the people, where can people find your book? Where can they find your other work online, Twitter, everything like that?
Yeah, so it is, you can go to bonifaceoption.com, and that'll take you right to the Amazon link. Or if you just want to go to Amazon and type in Boniface Option and my name, it should come up, and you can find it there. I hope your audience reads it and really enjoys it and gets a lot out of it. And other work that I'm doing, I'm on Twitter at Boniface Option. That's my handle. And I do a podcast with CJ Engel, who does work with Chronicles magazine. Our podcast is called Contramundum. It's a little bit smaller than yours, but for now. But if they want to check that out, we talk about politics and Christian nationalism and culture and many of the things that you talk about here. And CJ is brilliant. I always say he's the star of the show and the brains of the operation. And people, I think will really enjoy that as well.
Excellent, guys. Well, make sure that you check out Andrew's book. Make sure that you're checking out the podcast, everything else. Let's go ahead and see what questions we have here. Perspicacious Heretic says, the woke is getting punched away. You know, I've claimed victory many times in my ongoing dispute with Nima Parvini, academic agent, over whether the woke will be put away. I feel like Biden celebrating the Transgender Day of Visibility instead of Easter probably should seal that. I feel like I'm owed several cigars at this point, but he keeps drawing it. I'm trying to invoke the mercy rule. I just don't want to see him keep getting hit like that. Throw in the towel, buddy. It's okay that we all make a bad prediction every once in a while. Just don't just take the L. But he insists that things are going to turn around for him in the next year. So we will see. I feel pretty good about that prediction. Cooper Weirdo says, men defending women sounds fashy to me, guys. I mean, that literally is been the assertion for a long time, right? That being willing to protect someone vulnerable is that is the core of fascism at this point. Why wouldn't people expect that kind of accusation? Let's see. We've got Andrew Turba here says, Christ is king. Absolutely, man. Every time. Don't let anyone scare you away from the truth. All right. Cooper Willow says, MGTOW guys say that. That's true. They do. That is very interesting that there's this reflection. We made this joke before we got on that there were women posting about how these attacks in New York were secretly incel coordinated, attacks on 4chan instead of just the obvious case of what was happening in New York. But there is this weird mirror image of kind of the incel and the radical feminist, right? They're two people who want to blame the entirety of the modern world on the opposite sex. Again, turning the opposite sex into a political opponent instead of understanding that these are people that can and must coexist for things to flourish. And it's weird that the internet kind of provides us these kind of insulated communities where these ideas can flourish, where in the real world, like, you would just have to figure out how to get along, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like you said before, like, they've been turned into two political groups opposed to each other. And like, if you have that, your civilization's done, right? You're not going to have marriage. You're not going to have children. It's over. And so, hopefully like the woke does get put away and men and women can go back to coexisting and having good lives together.
To be clear, I think at some point it collapses. Like, my point is, my point of this bet is not that it's there in perpetuity. Like, that which cannot go on forever will not go on forever. It is wholly unnatural and it will collapse. But it will not be because our Nima's point is that our elites are ultimately interested in power, and so they'll turn things around because they're competent enough to realize that continuing to run this disastrous strategy will lose. I only know this because I know too many of these people. I've stared to, and because I'm a true believer. As followers of a religion, the true religion, we know religious fervor when we see it, and we're like, those are not people who are backing down. That they believe in us in a very real way. Florida Henry here says, this comes directly from public school and started back in the 80s or sooner. Seems to be the common denominator of many of our problems. Well, I mean, I think that public school does play a large part in this. Of course, the state having kind of this monopoly on education and basically this child daycare center that gets to distribute, acts as an ideological distribution center for kind of the state religion, means whatever they take up is going to be a big problem. And if you want to watch my episode with Mary Harrington, she makes a really good point about the institutionalized care of children and what that does to their ability to kind of develop the fact that every interaction is done through an intermediary means that anytime someone bumps, into something or gets into a fight or something, it becomes this therapeutic action that they have to go
Yeah.
through. Rather, where if it was parents, it would be like, okay, well, don't say stupid stuff to your friend. Learn how to throw a better right hook. Like
Yeah.
these would be this would get the advice you would get, and that has a very different impact. So I think you're right that this does involve the public school, though I think it's more, in many ways, it's not so much that the nefarious ideology was piped through the public school, though that did happen. It's more that the institutional setup for the public school actually creates inevitably this scenario.
Yeah.
Let's see, we've got Clayton here says HR departments are the corporate enforcement arm of the institutional feminism. Typical male behavior is now a fireable offense.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Like that. It's and like, where did HR departments come from? I mean, all of these things. Like, where America wasn't created, right? They didn't come, over on the Mayflower and have an HR lady there, right? This came out of the Civil Rights Act, right? That's ultimately where these things come from. You had to have this massive, superstructure in every large enough corporation at scale to be able to comply with the Civil Rights Act, and it ends up destroying the workplace. And I mean, most people have worked in a place where there are a lot of women in the workplace, and the dynamic is completely different than when you're in an all male work environment, and you could feel it, and it's really difficult for men to operate in that world. And so it's all all downstream of that. I mean, we could talk for another hour about like Christopher Caldwell's book, and I know you have before.
Yeah, at length. Yeah, it's very much the case that what constitutes a hostile work environment is anything that triggers the progressive political ideology. And so everything about that law, everything that's instituted in that, and where did the authority to enforce that come from? Exactly like you said, it's the Civil Rights Act. That's what created, and that's why I had this I kind of had this back and forth with Chris Rufo at one point on Twitter. He's like, well, we need to create like a night watchman civil rights bureau too. And it's like I'm pretty sure that's like creating a night watchman Soviet centralized state. Like that that's not how it works. Like you can't have a economic central planning just a little bit, right? Like you kind of have to get the whole thing root and branch here if you want to get it at all. Creeper Weirdo says, I don't get it. You guys talk like these criminals don't care about the culture war or even politics, but how can that be? Yeah, once again, there's just this amazing obsession with like, if we can just reason our way through this, like if you could just sit every criminal and deviant and misbehaving child down and just like work it all through with them, like that would be enough. And that's exactly the attitude that has you saying, why isn't everyone calling this out as if that's an actual solution to violence?
Wag your finger.
Yeah. But have they been through 3 more hours of HR lectures?
That's right.
Paladin YYZ says, I'm not sure an ichthyologist, but sure I'm doing that wrong. But I wonder if there is a species of fish that instead of taking the bait, they ate the fishermen. It would be interesting if there's such a method would reduce fishing. Andrew, can you decode that one for me?
Well, yeah, I don't think there is a species of, I mean, unless you're talking about sharks, right? But no, yeah, I think that's entirely true. Like that, I mean, and the analogy, of course, is just with regard to crime, right? If you had a situation where instead of preying on innocent people, the innocent people were able to fight back and cause major pain to criminals, right? The problem would solve itself very quickly, right? If you had attorney generals and DAs and so forth that gave tons of leniency to people defending themselves against criminals, the problem would be over. Like if it was, imagine if the situation was reversed, sort of thing. Imagine if the anarcho-tyranny was the opposite of what it is, right? You just have a normal society at that point.
Yeah,
right?
imagine if society was ordered correctly. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Whoa, crazy, right?
quite the inversion for today, to be sure. Forge and Anvil says Andrew cannot escape me on any stream or even on vacation.
Yes. Yeah, I got to meet him a couple weeks ago down in Tennessee, so that was awesome guy.
Nice. Perspicacious Heretic says, "I Andrew, I live super close to you. How do you communicate these days to people in our community that seem unaware of these issues or even open to them?"
Yeah, I think, I mean, some of it is um, you have to be a normie whisperer, right? You have to be able to talk about this stuff in a way that they can contextualize it, that they can conceptualize what's going on. Like, I mean, even like when I talk to buddies about the crime, like, yeah, the crime's really bad up in the cities, huh? And I'm like, yeah, I think we should just like lock up the criminals and not care, like, you know, whether they're white or black or purple or green, and just if they commit crime, put them away. And they're like, yeah, that's a good idea. Like, I mean, just framing it in just simple ways. I mean, you brought up like Rufo, and I think Rufo is a tremendous normie whisperer, right? He's able to take, you know, the right wing ideas and make them digestible to the general public. I mean, and of course, like Trump is an example of that as well. And yeah, that's a lot of it. Is you can't freak out the normies, right? You have to be able to just be able to talk about things in a very simple way. That crime is bad. We shouldn't have that. And even like the feminism stuff, like that's I think much more difficult, because like in the book I get into the fact that like women just weren't in the workplace until the 1950s and 60s. It was not normal. Like women had part-time jobs, or they worked from home, and yes, there were women that worked in factories and things like that. But it wasn't widespread, and there's this massive shift. And now we're in a place where every woman goes to college and gets a job and has a career and things like that. And so you can't like attack people and be like, you're doing it wrong. You're a bad person if you're not a trad wife baking sourdough all day. But you see these young women who are like on TikTok. You see these TikTok videos all the time where they're like, I shouldn't have gone to college. I just want to be a mom and a wife. And that's like a natural impulse. And so you kind of want to draw that stuff out. And you can't be like, you're a bad person. You need to pay back your student loans and all this kind of stuff. You just have to say, yeah, our society is really messed up. And it really is awful that you're in this position where you can't just be a mom and love your kids and raise your kids. Like, you have to go have a career. Like, framing it in those ways is, I think, way more powerful and way easier to understand and digest, rather than just going guns blazing and freaking them out.
Yeah, I get asked sometimes. I'll go on these shows and they'll be like, "What's your most controversial opinion? What's the most controversial opinion you hold?" And I always have the same answer loaded. It's my most controversial opinion is that men and women have to figure out how to live together.
Yeah.
That really, like,
Yeah.
left and right. That is my most
Yeah.
controversial opinion, because
Yeah.
there is an entire sphere, and I get it, but there's an entire sphere of people who just want vengeance. They just
Yeah.
want vengeance. They think that the other, the other sex has been the one that has destroyed their lives, and if only they could exact revenge, that then suddenly they would somehow be made whole. Like, nope,
Yeah.
nope. It turns out we actually need to have a society that is well ordered, and that means
Yeah.
living, for the good of a family that is, centered around, but the flourishing of both, not just the punishment of one for having
Yeah.
transgressed you at some point or the other. Let's see. Daedalus there with 1 Timothy 2:12. Everybody can check your scriptural references there. Monochrome Hysteria says, Andrew, what is your opinion on the term Christ is King when used by
Oh,
Christian nationalists? It's
yeah.
generally a good thing. I ask because to me it comes as a sloganeering and insincere.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this in other places, a little bit. And, I think, generally, yeah, it's a good thing. Like, even if people are saying it in an insincere way, right? I'm glad that it's out there. Um, but at like the end of the day, I want people that actually believe it and live it out to be saying it, more than the people who don't really believe it and they're just using it as an edgy thing. But then you see over the weekend, or over this last week, that a lot of the evangelical world has kind of glommed on to this point where it's like, no, these guys don't believe it, so they're just saying it and it's offensive and they're doing it on purpose. And it's like, I don't really care that they are. And in fact, it's actually a judgment on the evangelical world, right? In being too deferential and being purposely inoffensive, that we're terrified to assert ourselves.
Yes.
And so the only people that do are the guys you really don't like saying Christ is king.
100%.
So if we had been doing it, if we had been saying, hey, Ben Shapiro, you should repent and become a Christian and believe in Jesus because Christ is king, right? If our evangelical leaders had been saying that rather than like going to Daily Wire things and just, kowtowing to him all the time because they want to go on his platform or whatever, then and just being upfront, not like hating the guy or anything like that, but just saying, you're not a Christian, you should be. Jesus Christ is king. Repent and believe, right? I mean, you read the Bible, and it was controversial then, right? When Paul would go places, he was like riots would start, and because and he'd be dragged before the authorities because he's saying someone other than Caesar is king, and that's unlawful. And so, of course, it's offensive. It's an offensive term because people don't want to believe it, and we've been so afraid of offending and stepping on any toes and doing anything assertive and aggressive that now the only people that want to do it are the bad people. So that's what I think about that.
Yeah, it's really the amazing thing about this issue is it's so dumb because people are so interested in I don't want to say virtue signaling because I hate that term, but they're interested in kind of performatively dunking on internet racists that they want to avoid something that's true about the King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Yeah.
That really, that's it. That's at the end of the day. Like the people who are doing this are like, it's more important for me to look better than Nick Fuentes, who I'm not a fan of. But it's more important for me to look morally superior to this guy than it is to just tell the truth about Christ. Right.
Yeah.
And obviously, like these statements should be made in love because Christ is King is a statement of love. It is the most important thing that you can share with someone. And that is a great way to show them how you care about them, that you care about their salvation and that their acknowledgement of the lordship of Christ. And so that is the spirit in which it should be addressed. And people throwing it around otherwise are ill-advised. But that truth is way more important than dunking on internet racists. Yeah. Sorry, it just is.
Yeah.
And David French is out there giving me giving the exact same speech that you are now, guys. So I hope everybody gets a David French award. I'm making them up. I'm gonna start handing these statues out. The David French head to everybody because I predicted this a mile away. It's like we get it. You're one of the good ones. We understand it.
You're a
but
good
sorry,
little boy.
But Christ is still king. Sorry. That's it.
No, that's exactly it. And you see, like, speaking of, since you brought him up, the David French, you saw what he said about the Trans Day of Visibility. Like, all these people are so nasty and mean and horrible, the reaction to it. And it's like, your critique is of the people that are responding to this abomination, right? It's like, and it's the same frame. It's the exact same thing. It's like, I want to look good to the people that hate me. I want them to think I'm a good person more than I'm willing to say something that might offend them.
And look, I don't care about David French at this point. He's made his decision, right?
He is what he is.
At this point, it's between him and the Lord. But people who should know better, people who spend a lot of time making fun of people like David French, are now doing the David French routine. Because they want to show that they're not as bad as, they're not as edgy as, whatever. Who cares, guys? Speak the truth. If you have a problem with the way people are conducting themselves online, speak specifically to their problem, not to, don't try to silence something that is true and important. Lou Sassy says, clearly the main star of Contra Mundum, Christ is king.
You'll have to dig that up with CJ. Thank you, Lou.
I'm now mediating inter-podcast rivalries.
That's right.
Iowa and Slow says, a little too much optimism, men, and everyone should be aware of things that are probably going to get much worse. Again, I cannot stress this enough, guys. Look, I understand. I understand there's a lot of issues. Okay, I get it. I hear what you're saying. But you got to get out of this frame of men versus women. You just have to. It's poisonous. It's going to destroy your community. It's going to destroy your life. I understand the problems. We have to address the problems in society. I'm not saying close your eyes to this or turn away from this, but you cannot turn the opposite sex into your political battlefield. You simply can't, or you'll destroy what's left of your civilization, and you'll certainly make sure that you can't build anything new and better out of it, in what comes next.
Yeah, I think like his point. It might be. It might be. I don't know if you want to bring it up again. I think he might be thinking about like just the general everything going on, right? That he's saying maybe we're being too
maybe he's just talking about like the criminalization of the protection. In that case, that's true. I should give it the credit there. But
so like slow. I mean, I get it. Like I don't want to pretend. And like if you read the book, right, the first 6 chapters, like everybody when they read the anyway, we love Iowa too. But right, the first 6 chapters, people when they would like just read that, they're like, "Oh, this is so depressing. This is what are we gonna do?" And I was always afraid of that. Like they'd read it and be like, "Oh, it's all over. It's all so bad." And I do not want people to just be black-pilled and think that there's no possibility of victory whatsoever, because things can return to normal. Like yes, it is this Herculean task that is before us. Right, it is going to be really hard. We're going to go through a lot of stuff, and it is. Yeah, I think he's right. It is going to get worse before it gets better. Absolutely. But if the possibility of things getting better, even if it's a slim chance, if we don't fight for it and we don't have that frame that I think it's going to get better, I'm going to be optimistic, even as I'm aware of the reality of everything all around me. Then like, what are we even doing? Right? What are we even doing for? It's all over. No, like I do not want people to black pill ever.
Absolutely. Agreed. All right, guys. Well, like I said, make sure that you're checking out all of Andrew's stuff. And of course, if it's your first time on this channel, make sure that you go ahead and subscribe. Make sure you turn on notifications, click the bell, everything, so you can catch these streams when they go live. Make sure that you go ahead and also subscribe to our MacIntyre show on your favorite podcast platforms if you'd like to listen to these episodes as podcasts. And when you do, you can leave a rating or review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. If you'd like to go ahead and pre-order my book, The Total State, you can do so on Amazon. And I will actually be on Timcast this Thursday. So if you want to go ahead and check that out, make sure that you tune in on Thursday. All right, guys. Great seeing everyone. And as always, I'll talk to you next time.